Okay. Welcome to the Foul Play YouTube channel. Thank you, Judge.
Well, thank you there, Sugar. Better late than never. And thank you so much for coming along there, Mr. Kratz, and introducing our podcast. Well, look, guys, welcome and thank you for staying with us. We apologize for being a little bit late, just a few little technical gremlins, but I'm sure everything is all smoothed out. Thank you for joining us, guys. Our weekly podcast is entitled Reading with Uncle Ken. We're actually on part 19 at the moment. And as you know, we're reading passages from Ken Kratz's book. At the moment, we're on chapter 7, entitled The Bones. And of course, the bones are very interesting, very controversial. So what we're going to be doing, guys, is we're going to be continuing. We're going to try our very best to finish this chapter as well. My name is Dr. Silkman, guys, and I'm from the Foul Play team. Welcome. Well, look, if you like what we're doing on the channel, please subscribe. And if you like our podcast, please hit the like button, leave your DNA on the like button. And remember, guys, we're very interactive. If you've got any questions or concerns and things like that, don't hesitate. Put it in chat. And look, tonight, I have the pleasure of the company of the following members of the panel. We have Alice, we have Bibi, we have Checking Convictions, we have Neverly, we have Susan, we have Zoe, and we have Sammy. And I believe that both Checking Convictions and Sammy will be checking the chat. So guys, as per usual, if you have any questions, write them down in chat and we'll try and answer them the best that we can during the podcast. I'd just like to say, before we start the podcast proper, that if you've checked YouTube lately, you probably have seen all these little Netflix clips that I've put up that I've gone through Making a Murderer 1 and 2. And I've also put together, I've done some editing myself to do little snippets. And I believe at the moment, we're on 47 of them. And they have really been well received. And, you know, the thing that we got to remember is that there are new people that are coming on all the time, new people coming onto the case that may not have heard about Brendan Dassey or Stephen Avery. And, you know, unless you've got 20 hours to spare, these little clips give you a really good snapshot of the case. And I really think they've gone down well. What I've tried to do is I've tried to edit them myself to put things together much more neatly in a little package. And I tried to balance between Brendan Dassey and Stephen Avery. Let me assure you, I've got a lot more to put up, and I think they're a really good snapshot of the series. And I tell you what, we're so lucky that the trials were videotaped and put on Netflix. God bless the team. You know, we're learning, we're really learning all the time. All right, guys. So, and of course, we also have our open mic sessions, which is run by Jack, and they've been very, very popular. With the open mics, we tackle different topics, and we literally pass the microphone around. And if, you know, you want to come on and you want to have a chat, you know, please do. You're most welcome. All right, guys, so what we'll do, we'll make a start on the actual podcast. So the way it works, guys, what I do is I read specific passages from the chapter, and then I ask a question to the panel. Now, I'll quote. Now, this is a little bit long, but bear with me because it's a very important passage. I quote, "On the important and hotly contested issue of the primary burn site, Dr. Eisenberg was confident. Of course, if you've ever spoken to a scientist, you know they aren't in the habit of making definite pronouncements. But Dr. Eisenberg regarded it as extremely unlikely that the primary burn site had been anywhere but the burn pit behind Avery's garage. And just to add a little bit more to that quote, don't forget, guys, that also human cremains were also found in Yonder burn barrel number 2. So just continuing the quote in Ken Kratz's book, I quote, "The 4 bone pieces in the burn barrel were in general larger pieces than those found in the burn pit. I believe the most likely explanation is that Avery moved 4 of the larger pieces of bone that were not breaking down as well to the barrel, perhaps to burn and break them down further." So here's the question, guys. Why would Stephen Avery place any cremains in Yonder burn barrel number 2 and leave the other cremains in his burn pit? Right, so who would like to answer that? Who would like to start? Sammy?
He wouldn't.
Yes, I agree. Bibi?
Well, everybody agrees that you could burn a body better in a burn barrel than in a burn area because it wasn't
Yes.
really a pit. So if he did move them, they would have been then burnt more, right?
Potentially, yes.
Smaller
Yes.
than the rest. Yeah.
Yes. Now, you know how Ken Kratz said that Stephen Avery moved 4 bones or so bones from his burn pit to the burn barrel. Well, let me tell you that those bones that were found in the burn barrel, they were small as well. They're only about an inch or so. They weren't large bones. So Ken Kratz was actually trying to give a reason as to why Stephen Avery will pick out just 4 bones and bring them to the burn barrel. Bibi?
Well, what did he do with the rest of them? Get a helicopter to fly him almost 2 miles out so he could scatter them for 2 miles?
Correct.
I think it was a tornado got a hold of him.
Yeah.
Oh,
there you go. Yeah. The damn pesky tornadoes.
Don't start me on weather events. Correct. And it's rather remarkable how Ken Kratz always has to come up with some type of bizarre reason why the cremains were found in Yonder burn barrel number 2. And his reason was because the bones were too big. So could you imagine the scenario where Stephen Avery is selectively picking 4 small bones about an inch or so bigger just to bring them to his sister's burn barrel, which is pretty crazy.
Unbelievable.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Bibi. Checking convictions.
Well, why would he just move 4 of them out of his pit? I mean, if he's going to take them, why wouldn't he take all of them? And, that would make sense to me. Take them all out and put them in that barrel. But Paul Ward says they did it to help tie in Brendan to the case.
Well, yeah. Well, put it this way, right? Not only Brendan. Potentially, if cremains. Well, there's two ways I see it. Checking convictions. Either the body was actually burnt in Yonder burn barrel number 2. And Yonder burn barrel number 2 was switched from another location and brought onto the property. So it was switched, or it was used as the vessel to dump the cremains. And whoever dumped the cremains obviously didn't realize that there were more cremains left in the burn barrel. That is a possibility. Alice, do you have a comment?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got to remember, Doc, I mean, he was that much of a genius that he removed all traces of DNA, So what's to say that he wasn't an expert in the anatomy as well? And he just
Yes, correct.
so many bones, just to put it in there just to give them the idea that something was there. I mean, the whole thing's bloody ludicrous.
That's correct. That's correct. And as you know, Dr. Eisenberg was put on the stand and questioned about, what was the primary. And it's really interesting how Ken Kratz was trying to say that Eisenberg actually said that the burn pit was the primary burn site. However, as you know, we've read the transcripts, right? And we know that when Strang questioned Eisenberg on the stand, she could not determine what the primary burn site was. Susan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think it's these little gems in his book that give him away.
Correct.
They're like embedded.
Correct. 100% correct.
Embedded confessions, yeah.
100% correct.
The wrongdoing.
But
embedded pieces of bullshit.
Yes, that's true, Bibi. But the thing which is remarkable is that Ken Kratz feels the need that he has to give a reason or an excuse for all the findings that don't fit the narrative. Exactly. And that's the frustrating part. And he just simply writes that in his book because he has to give a reasoning. Neverly, do you have a comment? Thank you, Susan. Never.
Yeah. Pratt found this story, as always, sounds good, but it has nothing to do with reality. Because if it had to do something with reality, if he cared for reality, if that was his mission, unlike it wasn't, it was, to put Stephen Avery away, he would have consulted some true, legit professionals, right, and experts,
yes,
like Dehan, who said that it's impossible to burn the body with a big whopping fire,
Correct.
that you keep
Correct.
adding gas to it and stuff. It was just, evaporate. So it's really nothing to do with reality. It's just a story, a part of his story that he's been presenting and tooting all along. And, the illusion that we keep talking and repeating from week to week, everything is just an illusion of what happened.
Yes, but there's one thing, though. The jury never went out to the salvage yard. So the jury never actually got to see the burn pit, where the burn barrels was. It was all done by a computer simulation. I really think that was a big mistake, not allowing the jury to actually go on the property to get the logistics of the whole place, how it actually looked. Because remember, the burn barrel, Yonder burn barrel number 2, was not 1 or 2 feet away, was actually quite a considerable distance from the burn pit. And so what Ken Kratz is trying to say is, Stephen Avery picked out 4 bones, the biggest bones, and decided he was going to put them in his sister's burn barrel, which is rather ridiculous. Checking convictions, do you have a comment?
Yes, is that the burn barrel that went back to the Averys? Is that the number that went back? No?
Well, that's the issue. That's the issue. The question is,
one of them was picked up and then brought back. So, I mean, if that would have been the one, come on, that's a little, little suspicious.
That's correct. That's correct. And I think what I find rather disturbing was that the contents of the burn barrels were put on a blue tarp and then sealed and then placed back into the burn barrel. So if you swap the contents of the burn barrels, it's like a game, a checkers
shell game.
A shell game. You've got no idea what belongs to what, but the important thing is the illusion. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Yeah, the one barrel that they took on guided tour and had a parade for, it could have went to deer camp even before it made its way back to Avery's. Yes, and then back to the sorting facility or wherever they were doing it, in the back of the police station or wherever it was they were emptying those barrels at.
Correct. And so you don't really know what the origins or where the contents of those burn barrels come from. That's the problem. And I think, Bibi, you said last week that Moving On spent years trying to sort out all the burn barrels.
She spent 3 years looking at just the burn barrels, and she swears there's 11 burn barrels.
Wow. Yep, that's very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you, BB. Alice, do you have a comment?
It's a thing from TTM Fangirl says, I remember the news report at the time where KK told the public that he spread the bones about with buckets. Of course, the news report now is nowhere to be found.
Yes, correct. And I think they're actually trying to get Brendan Dassey to admit how these cremains were being spread, because obviously, if you're the investigators and you can hear it in the calls, something weird is going on. The cremains are not in just one location. They're in at least 3 different geolocations. So the more they spread out, the more the investigators and searchers spread out, the more cremains they were finding. So the state had to account for how come all these cremains are being found in all these different locations. And that explains why Ken Kratz didn't want to talk about the cremains in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. I think that's pretty obvious. Does anyone have any other comments? Jack61, welcome. Neverly.
I'm surprised that Kratz didn't say that Bear, the dog, didn't eat the cremains. I mean,
Yeah, I was just going to say
leftovers.
that, Neverly.
Yeah.
What about the dog? I mean, you know,
Yes.
why did
Yeah,
they
well, the dog
send
ate
it by
the
the
homework
dog?
type of thing. Yeah.
They implied it because they took the dog to a vet and had him watch him and checked his stools.
Correct. And I believe they also took dog stool into custody as well. You know.
Yeah.
And isn't it rather interesting that who said that their dog was going to eat someone from their feet up?
Mr. Zipper.
Mr. Zipper, correct. And it's rather interesting how the way Mr. Zipper, George Zipper, made out that his dog was very vicious is the way that Ken Kratz transposed the viciousness of George Zipper's dog onto Stephen Avery's dog, Bear. And Bear was not a vicious dog. Just very, very interesting. Jack61, did you have a comment?
Well, other than the Sandman revisiting me this morning, no, I'm good. Finally awake too.
Good. Fantastic. All right, guys. Does anyone else have any other comments?
We're good so far.
Oh, we're all good? Oh, awesome. All right. So for those who are new to the case, human cremains that were cut, burnt, and heavily fragmented were found in 3 different locations, as far as we're aware. In Stephen Avery's burn pit, in Yonder Burn Barrel number 2, and also in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. I believe that there were 4 sites in the Manitowoc County gravel pit where human cremains were found. When Eisenberg wrote her report, she actually mentioned the fact that there were human cremains in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. And it's disingenuous of Ken Kratz, who did not want to talk about those cremains. And as you can see in his book, he gave an excuse as to what those cremains were doing in Yonder Burn Barrel number 2, right? Because he couldn't account for it in any other way. So his excuse was, okay, they were there because Stephen Avery picked them out, right? Now, does anyone on the panel actually believe that story? Does he actually believe that story?
Absolutely not.
Convictions.
Absolutely not. Like I said, I mean, I don't even understand why Kratz would think that he would have to explain 4 very minute-sized bones he picked out personally to put into a barrel. Okay, it makes no sense that he would scatter them anywhere, you know, other than way away from his house and leave anything in his pit at all. So it's ludicrous.
Correct. And you see, what is so bizarre and ludicrous is that if Stephen actually went to the actual bother of picking up 4 remains and placing them in Yonder burn barrel number 2, why not simply scrape them all up and put them in a tin or a container and drive 20 miles somewhere and dump them?
Exactly.
Why would he pick out 4 and decide to put them in his sister's burn barrel? It actually made no sense whatsoever. Neverly, do you have a comment?
He honestly could have put them in his pocket and went about his business and disposed them at Menards or wherever he went. Flush them down the toilet.
Correct. It just seems rather bizarre that he would move a subset of cremains in his sister's burn barrel, but furthermore, he would also dump cremains in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. It seems rather bizarre, and that's why, remember, we talked about it last week, guys, that Dr. Eisenberg refused to classify the pelvic fragments in the Manitowoc County gravel pit as being human. She would have been under strict instruction, probably by Fallon and Kratz, not to give a classification, as in human, animal, or otherwise. She only said suspect, possible human, which truly is remarkable for a forensic anthropologist of her, of her stature. It's just completely bizarre. All right, guys. So, do we have any other comments? Bibi.
Yeah, it's also funny that they never checked the septic tanks on the properties. There had to be where the wastewater goes on the trailers.
Yes.
Because these are all really small pieces, and usually there's a lid somewhere where they put the hose down to suck it up. They could have opened that lid and thrown them in there, for God's sakes, because.
Yeah, Bibi, I have a feeling that they did check the septic tanks.
Did they?
I can't remember the report. I have a feeling. I have a feeling that they actually did check the septic tanks.
Okay, because I've never stumbled across that one.
Yes,
so.
I remember reading it.
I know they checked several. They checked several for sure.
Did they? All right.
Yeah.
Yes, and they also checked the pond, that small pond.
Yeah, I know they checked the pond and the pond wouldn't empty because it's spring fed. So they kept trying to empty it, but it kept refilling.
Yes, I do believe that they actually did check the septic tanks for
I missed that one.
For cremains and other body parts. They obviously found nothing.
Job.
Yep, that would definitely be a messy job. Yep, correct. Thank you, Bibi. Checking convictions. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, what would make sense to me about moving the bones is him putting them all in a bucket and taking them to Crevice with him. I mean, they never went out there and looked for anything. So, I mean, he would have been able to get rid of them out at his vacation cabin, It doesn't make any sense. I can't believe that Kratz would even think we would fall for such an explanation as he claims it to be.
Correct. And, quite frankly, that's really ludicrous, right? That's really ludicrous. If you're going to go to all the trouble of moving some cremains, you'll take them all, right? And it's rather ridiculous that the cremains, they weren't found on the 5th or the 6th or the 7th. They were found on the 8th. And you know what? They were accidentally found on the 8th. And what I didn't appreciate, guys, is that all the cremains were not in the burn pit. Some of the cremains, this is interesting, some of the cremains were found around the burn pit as if someone was transporting them to the burn pit and they were falling out of a container. So not all the cremains were actually in the burn pit, which is very interesting. Alice, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a fact, Doc. I mean, they never thought for 1 minute that this case would get scrutinised the way it's been scrutinised by people like us and everything like that. They thought that when Stephen and Brendan were convicted, that was it, that was the end of it, and then nobody would know the shenanigans and things like that they got up to. But because we have looked into it and we are seeing these things and we are finding the holes left, there's more holes in this case than there is in a sieve. You know what I mean? So they did not realise that this would happen, and now they're crapping it. And that's why they're constantly still trying to keep up with their bullshit story that they're continuing with.
Yes, they thank you, Alice. They basically got caught out, and you're correct. Not in their wildest imaginations would they have thought that literally millions of people would have seen that documentary, and they've become so passionate about the injustice. Now, remember, it's not just injustice to Brendan and Stephen. It's an injustice to Teresa Horbach as well. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Yeah, Darkside was mentioning, wasn't there something about a vertebrae in the pond or the quarry?
Yeah. I think it turned out to be animal in origin, because if you look at the report by Eisenberg, there was no intact bone found, only bone fragments. So there definitely wasn't a vertebrae found in a pond or anything like that. Remember, they burn animals, and some of the cremains or bones actually moved by animals as well. So that one didn't turn out to be anything of substance. Because remember, in one location they thought they found a foot, and it turned out to be burnt insulation.
Right.
So yeah, so that vertebrae didn't turn out. I don't think it was human anyway. Yeah, I think they misclassified it. All right, guys, does anyone have any other comments?
We're good.
Oh, excellent. Okay, guys. Well, here's the next quote. All right, I quote, Special Agent Rodney Pato of the Arson Bureau at the Wisconsin Department of Justice had been viewing burn sites for 30 years, earning him the reputation of being the most experienced arson investigator in the state. He too believed that Teresa had been burnt in the pit behind Avery's garage. Pato also explained more about the fire itself. Tires, he felt, accelerated it. A van seat made of polyurethane foam, referred to as solid gasoline, had also been burned in the inferno. Accelerated this way, a fire could burn a body to bone and ash in a matter of several hours. All right, so here's the question. Photos show that the van seat was not in the burn pit. It was actually on the side of the burn pit. So how did that contribute to the overall fuel? So notice here what Ken Kratz is doing. He's fully aware that to burn or convert a human being to tiny bone fragments, you need two things. You need time and you need a lot of fuel, neither of which Stephen Avery had. So notice, Ken Kratz is now giving the illusion that there was a huge amount of fuel in the burn pit, and that clearly wasn't the case. Susan, do you have a comment?
If you were truly going to use that van seat as fuel, you would put the body on top of that seat.
Correct.
Not the seat on top of the body.
Thank you.
Correct.
It makes no sense whatsoever.
Correct. And I don't think, and here's the frustrating thing, I don't believe that the investigators tested any of the items that they got from the burn pit to associate them with the burning of a body, right? Including the seat. Now, how bizarre is that? So Ken Kratz knew that you needed a lot of fuel. So he had to somehow find all these sources of fuel that can actually burn a human body. Now, there wasn't a huge amount of tires that were burnt as well. Only a few were. because you know that when you burn a tire, you produce all that black smoke. Susan, do you have a
But
comment?
they sure use those steel belts inside the tires to say the bones were intertwined with them.
Yes. In actual fact, that's right. In actual fact, that's the next question that we'll talk about. So, do you guys believe that Stephen actually had enough fuel to convert a human body to bone fragments?
No way.
Or time.
No, he never.
Yeah,
Maybe.
or enough time.
No, he never.
Time's the
had
real
enough
problem.
Correct. Because we've all seen documentaries in which people have done experiments where they've placed, I believe, a pig carcass, and they've completely surrounded it with wood, a huge fuel load, and they had to tend to the fire overnight, right? So you need a lot of fuel and you need a lot of time. Sometimes it can take days in order to do it. And there's one problem. Did anybody at the Avery Salvage Yard report a foul smell? Susan?
Nope.
No,
No.
they did not. Mm-mm.
No. So no one, no one actually witnessed a body burning. 2, no one saw a massive fire with plenty of smoke and flames, despite what Scott Tadich said. Right, Neverly?
Yes.
Despite what
There's many instances of people actually burning bodies that they have to compare to. People burn
Correct.
bodies in pits. It happens all the time.
Correct.
But they take days.
Oh, yes, they do.
generally.
Weeks.
Yeah.
Like the one in
Yes.
Minnesota. Dr. Silkman seen that show where it was like, to me, it was the closest. I think it was Polyclasp was the name. And
Yes.
it was the closest that I've ever seen where they, had just very, very small fragments and like
Correct.
a half a tooth. And they couldn't even, make a positive ID with just the bones. They had to use the tooth and the material that the dentist had just used a week before. But it took a week or longer for that man to do it. So it's going to
Correct.
take a long time if you do it in something like that. You're going to continually feed that for days.
Correct. And so that's correct. So you need basically 2 elements here, guys. You need a huge amount of fuel. You need direct heat on the body, because one of the problems of the burn pit is that it's small. It's really not a burn pit, as BB used to say. It's a small burn area. And the trouble with the burn pit was that it was small and open, which meant that flames went into the atmosphere, which meant that you lost a lot of the heat, you lost a lot of the combustion, you lost a lot of the fuel. That's critical. Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yeah, when we were talking about burning pigs, you know how Hawaiian people, they roast pigs under the clay something, I don't know what it's called.
Yes.
They
Yes.
dig a hole, they put wood or
carcass.
coal, whatever it is, and then they put a whole pig there, of
Yes.
course dressed already, and then they cover it with a clay lid. And that's
Yes.
if you go to a luau, that's a tradition, and they started like the night before, because it takes that long time, even under control environment, which is, they know what they're doing, first of all. Then the
Yes.
pig is already got it, and then they have that lid. And the
Correct.
pig is certainly not 130 pounds. It's probably like 50 at the most. So
Yeah.
it takes hours and hours and hours. So
Correct.
whatever
Correct.
they said that happened in this case, it didn't. And it was debunked so many times. And nobody
That's
smelled
correct.
the foul smell of the burning a human body
Yes.
that was not got it. Oh God,
Correct.
yeah. Nobody.
And, my
The only
understand-
smell that somebody reported was Mr. Matz, that was on
Yes.
the opposite side of Stephen's house.
Correct.
And the other smell that they talked about was what's Earl Avery's best friend, Robert Fabian, who said that he
Yes.
smelled some plasticky smell for 2
Yes.
seconds. That was it.
Yes, and that was it. Yes, correct. Yeah, it's certainly bizarre, that's for sure. Thank you, Neville. Jack 61.
Yeah, in relation to what Neverly's talking about, I think it's hot coals they use.
Yes.
Number 2, to think about burning a body, I just think about seeing these videos from India and how much wood that they continually use when they're cremating.
Cremations. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And it's just hours and hours and just a huge amount of fuel. Oh my God.
Correct. Because, for the new listeners listening to this case or reading about this case, Bibi has said it many, many times about the box of bones. Came in a box and left in a box. It literally, the cremains were literally tiny bone fragments, right? There were no intact bones. 60% of the skeleton is missing, right? And they were just tiny bone fragments. You need, and look, believe me, people that have worked in crematoriums, if you've seen a body burn in a crematorium, what you get out at the end from a crematorium burning is exactly what you saw at the Avery salvage site, those cremains. That meant that those bones or the body parts received a lot of heat, which you can't get in an open burn pit. Neville, do you have a comment?
Yes, just for the newbies, when you say tiny cremains, how tiny are we talking about, Dr. Silkman?
That could be about the size of your thumbnail. They're
or
small.
a pinky nail? Yeah.
Yeah, pinky nail. And they could be, I think the biggest bone was 1 or 2 inches, but they were all heavily fragmented as if they were crunched.
Thank you.
They were the size of small rocks, which is very, very interesting. Thank you, Neville. Checking convictions.
We seem to be forgetting that if you burn a body in a pit or wherever it's on the ground, you have the liquid from your body that seeps into the soil and leaves a gigantic black stain. So you would see where the body was, and to my knowledge, they didn't. When they tested the soil, there was no DNA found in it. So that's a big clue too.
Correct. There was no black goo that was present on the ground, which is a telltale sign that the cremains were brought from somewhere else to the burn pit. Right. That's a classic telltale sign. Alice, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, just for the newbies that are joining in that as well, Kratz and that say that he had at least 5 days and things like that, but he didn't, because when you read through and you go through more of the stuff, that you see that Andy Pandy went to Stevens on the 3rd, I think it was the 3rd, and he done a search and everything like that, and never seen a thing. Never seen remains, never seen blood, never seen any signs of disturbance or anything like that. So with him saying that he had 5 days, that's a load of bullshit, because the police were round at Stevens' house on the 3rd when when Teresa got reported missing, and they seen nothing.
Correct. And, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Alice. I think the early investigators and law enforcement officers that went to the salvage yard were probably shaking their heads thinking, nothing's happened here, right? I mean, these are trained police officers. They're trained detective investigators. And a crime scene unit went inside the garage and inside the trailer. They used luminol, they used lights, they did every form of testing you can think of. They couldn't actually determine that a crime had taken place. Checking convictions.
Yeah, Remaker and Link went there too, and when they got out, he's even on stand saying it. Remaker says, at first I looked right at him and says, I don't think that this happened here. They don't see anything, so.
Correct. You know, the thing is, and I've put up a few little of those clips in about the burning of the body, the human body, and there's no doubt that you're going to get more. And this is Dahan, right, who's witnessed cadavers being burnt under various conditions, and he said that if you're going to burn a human body and convert it to bone fragments, the one place that you could do it is, guess what, in a burn barrel, right? Now, we know that Teresa Horbach, for those who don't believe that she's dead, let's say the victim was chopped to pieces, into smaller pieces. And if you have the large torso, which is full of organs, if they're missing, right? Because remember, about 60% of the skeleton is missing. We don't know where it is. But if you have the limbs and if you have the head and you put them all in a burn barrel and you burn it, then the heat is going to reflect off the metal. So it's like a burning vessel. You have the direct heat, and if you aerate it enough, the temperature is going to reach really, really high. If you go on YouTube, someone did a turbo burn barrel where all they did is supply oxygen to the burn barrel, and it flamed and no smoke. It got very hot, no smoke, and all he did was supply oxygen, and that was all that was needed. Turbo burn barrel. And so if you burn the body parts in a burn barrel, they're going to be broken down to tiny fragments. If you then take the contents of the burn barrel and tip them into the burn pit, then what's obviously happened, who's ever done the transporting left some of the cremains behind, right? And hence, that's why Ken Kratz had to say, oh, well, it was Stephen Avery that did it. And that's clearly not the case. So, guys, do you believe that a burn barrel is more likely where the victim was cremated? Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Well,
yeah.
And also, there was none of that black goo in the barrel either.
Correct. So the question is, where's the primary burn site? We don't know. Kathleen Zellner believes that the primary burn site is actually in the quarry, right? In the quarry. Jack 61, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say, I think it's the quarry, but, we don't know for sure.
Correct. So because we know that the salvage yard has got burn barrels, all you do is you simply gather up the cremains, stick them in a tarp, and bring them down to the salvage yard. That's it. All you do is you tip the cremains into the burn pit and walk away. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Yeah. Wasn't there some kind of a witness saying that they saw or thought there was a fire out there at that quarry?
Two girls. Yeah, 2 girls. And they heard people talking coming from the quarry, which was very, very interesting. So Zellner believes that the actual cremation took place in the quarry. Now, remember, the quarry is a very noisy place because the machinery is going just about 24/7. So is anyone going to notice a fire in a burn barrel in a quarry? Maybe not. Alice, do you have a comment?
Clive is saying Officer Chris Wendorf examined the RAV at the lab, nothing incriminating inside or outside. Where's Officer Wendorf now? Was he not forced to resign because he would not play Kratz's game?
That's a good one. I honestly haven't heard of Officer Chris Wendorf. That's a new one to me. Has anyone else heard of him? Jack 61.
I've heard the name, but I don't know about him being forced to resign. I don't have any knowledge of that, but I have heard his name. Yes, he was part of. He was there.
Okay. Very interesting. Guys, do we have any other comments so far? Susan.
The truth of the matter is, we have no idea where the primary burn site was.
Correct. And you know what? Neither did Dr. Eisenberg. She had to admit. Remember how she said that she believed that the burn pit was the primary burn site because she would have thought that the bones would have had more fragmentation. And then Strang brilliantly said, "Oh, you mean more fragmentation than using shovels and a sifting equipment to get the cremains out?" And in the end, Dr. Eisenberg said, "No, you're right. I wouldn't, if you're going to break the bones even further, it's because you're shoveling and sifting, right?" So she had to backtrack and sort of say, well, she really didn't know where the primary burn location was.
That's correct. Right. She couldn't commit to it. Yep.
Correct. That probably would have given Ken Kratz a heart attack. But she had to be honest, right? Sammy, do you have a comment?
Shane is asking how far was the quarry from the Avery Salvage Yard?
Does anyone know the exact distance? It was over 1,000 meters. Because I remember doing a Google looking at it was quite a considerable distance from it.
The one guy said 2 miles, didn't he?
Yeah, about 2 miles.
A mile and a half.
That was part. That was part of where some of us found. But I think to get to the nearest edge of it was like a half a mile, and then, of course, the sepulchre. If everyone thinks about the sepulchre, and on November 9th, and he said I found these couple of gallons of 5-gallon buckets of bones. That was about a mile and a half away.
Yeah. So if you go to Google Earth, you can actually visually see the distance between Stephen's trailer and the Manitowoc County gravel pit. But in between the Manitowoc County gravel pit, there's, I believe, Redonce quarries. The place is surrounded by Redonce quarries, but the Manitowoc County gravel pit is owned by the county, not by Redonce. So that's where those pile of cremains were found, in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Alice, do you have a comment?
It's actually a question from the Londoner. Is it possible whoever burned the body at the quarry thought it was part of Avery property?
Oh, easy. Because there's no delineation. If you look at it from above, there's really the only delineation with the berms, right? But if someone didn't know the layout of the salvage yard, you could have easily mistaken, oh yeah, that area there could be for storing future cars, right? So it could have been very easily misidentified. Because remember, that always refer, isn't it interesting, the deer camp, the quarries, in relationship to the salvage yard. They're trying to connect the two together. Bibi.
Yeah, actually, there's like 3 quarries right there, because there's Manitowoc, there's Redonce, and then there's that other one. I can't remember the name of it.
Michael's.
Yeah,
I think
that's where the supposed piece of bone with the piece of meat on it, I believe, is supposed to be found.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's quite confusing, and you're right. There was some tissue found in Michael's quarry, but they deemed it to be, now wait for it, non-human. The bone with the tissue on it, item BZ, allegedly came from Stephen Avery's burn pit. Allegedly.
Okay, I knew there was some piece of meat.
Yes, you're correct, Bibi. You're correct.
That they found at a 3rd quarry. So you're talking, these quarries are not small.
They're not.
Every bit as big as the 40 acres that the salvage yard. They're even bigger.
They're big. They're big quarries. Correct. Yes.
And the only thing really separating them is that berm, which a berm is basically a pushed up hill of dirt that is like a blocker or a fence, or in place of a fence.
Yes.
And that's
correct.
what separates the property. So you're only talking, maybe a couple of 100 feet from where Steve's is to where that berm is. And then once you're on the other side of that berm, then you're on Redon's property.
That's correct. That is 100% correct. And apparently the berms back then weren't as tall. They're much bigger now.
Right. In places there wasn't even berms. Now they've reinforced.
They're more established, correct.
Yes.
So someone could have easily thought that the surrounding quarries were part of the Avery Salvage Yard. Yeah, that's a very, very good point. Susan, do you have a comment? Thank you.
Yeah, just one other thing. Eisenberg was never even at the property.
That's
so
correct.
It was ridiculous that she could even, comment on the original burn site.
I think to me, to Susan, that's the most embarrassing thing out, right? One, we know that there was no coroner and was not called out onto the property. And I think we can pretty guess why, right? But to make it worse, no forensic anthropologist was called out into the site either. So what law enforcement did, what the investigators did, they quickly gathered up the cremains, sifted them, put them in a box, and then handed them over to a forensic anthropologist off the salvage yard. So
and the fact that they took no photos, no in situ photos, that just says it all right there.
Yes, it does. It does. Now, there is imagery from a helicopter, I believe, that show officers with cameras, but I think the party's over. I reckon that the sifting had already been done. So the bones would have already been removed. So think about it. You've got no coroner. The state's forensic anthropologist never stepped foot onto the salvage yard to look at anything in situ. The only thing she received was a box of bones, and she was reliant on the honesty of the people that did the sifting. That's it. So she received a box of bones. Susan, do you have a comment?
I'm curious what the dimensions on that box are.
I don't think that box is very big.
I don't either.
I haven't seen a ruler, because there's a picture that shows the box of bones with Ziploc bags. Those Ziploc bags are only a couple of inches. So maybe that box is about the size of maybe a small or medium-sized pizza. It's small.
Yeah.
They're not that big. Jack 61. Thank you, Susan. Jack 61.
I was just going to say, isn't it funny that they didn't put a scale beside it? For size.
It probably was deliberate.
Oh,
You're right. It probably was deliberate, because normally when you take photos, you always put a ruler for scale, just to give you an idea how big the item is. Correct. And Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I caught on to Jack's facetiousness about that question. And also, isn't it funny that Eisenberg, the best that Kratz came across, the expert, right? One of the best experts. She wasn't at the quarry. She wasn't at the yard. She received a box of bones, took a couple of days to come back from her weekend, wherever she was, in a wine country. And then she refused to put him under the microscope. Yeah.
Correct.
That's an expert for you.
Yep, correct. She didn't do a proper diagnosis of the cremains at the Manitowoc County gravel pit. She refused to call them human, because if she did call them human, then the state's got a real big problem, because that meant that Stephen Avery was able to pick out part of a pelvis and bring it 2 miles down the road in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Because remember, Dr. Bennett found the ilium bone, which is a part of the pelvis, in the box of bones. So that really would have made it very, very embarrassing for the state. Bibi, do you have a comment? Thank you, Neverly. Bibi.
I myself think of the box as being like the size of a ream of paper, myself personally. Because it's kind of like rectangularly looking. But also it's funny in that clip that Kratz put out for convicting, where he's talking to Rookie, and he says, that infamous line about, the coroner does is kick the body. And correct. I had an anthropologist, so.
Correct.
A forensic anthropologist, which is better. But he never was there either.
No. And nor was Dr. Eisenberg. Now, here's the irony, right? Had Deborah Kakach been permitted to go onto the property, she would have brought her own team of specialists, including a forensic anthropologist, on the scene. It's pretty obvious to me that they did not want the coroner or her team present at the salvage yard. Susan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused about Eisenberg. Didn't she, in the end, categorize those as human bones in the quarry, some of them?
Yes,
on her
correct.
final report or something.
Correct. And what's remarkable, this is what Kathleen Zellner found. So Kathleen Zellner looked at her report and discovered that many of the piles that were found at the Manitowoc County gravel pit contain burnt, cut, human cremains. And here's the kicker. Dean Strang said the bones that were found in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, in Yonder Burn Barrel number 2, and Stephen Avery's burn pit, he asked her, were they all burnt to the same degree? And you know what Eisenberg said? Yes. They were all
but at trial, Kratz was only going to spend 60 seconds because, he couldn't even say they were human. But in fact, they had been categorized human by that time, right?
Correct. They were classified as human. So Ken Kratz hid it. He didn't want to bring Eisenberg's report, where it clearly has in the table exactly where the cremains were found, their GPS location, and the fact that they contain human cut bones.
So and many of those are what they gave back to the Hallbox, correct?
They're all gone, correct, 100% correct. Thank you, Susan. Jack 61.
Also to add, cut remains were found in Dassey burn barrel number 2, I think it's number 2, and in the quarry. He did not want that connection made either.
That is correct. That's correct. And so, here's the ridiculous situation, right? Stephen Avery was found not guilty of mutilation of a corpse, but Brendan Dassey was, right? And when did Brendan Dassey ever mention the fact that they had actually dismembered Teresa Hallbach? Did he ever say that?
I don't think he did. I think they did.
No, absolutely not. He never did. He said it was. He said he's seen toes. A toe. They said he's seen a foot. He said forehead. They said a head. So according to, if you're listening to Brendan, it was a full body.
Brendan also said they put the whole body into the fire. The whole body.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. And
but
that's
yet
why
he was convicted of mutilation
of a corpse. Correct.
Yes. He never said anything about a saw or any of that kind of thing.
No, that's correct. There were saw perf marks on the bones. And what's remarkable is that Dr. Symes had a picture of straight hesitation cut marks in the bone, which meant that someone with a blade was cutting in the bone and then stopped. So therefore, there was definitely a form of dismemberment that had taken place. And in some of the cremains, you can actually see the cut mark go straight through the bone, which is remarkable. So why would you dismember somebody? Easy to transport, right? Because you're not transporting a whole human body, you're transporting parts of a human body. If you mix them up with, say, a deer carcass, who's going to know? No one's going to know. Alice, do you have a comment?
WATP is saying the Wisconsin State Crime Lab found flesh and blood at the Michaels Materials Quarry near State 147 and at the east side of the Avery Road, about a quarter-mile from the Avery Salvage Yard secured crime scene.
That's correct. That's correct. And when Culhane, thing was called item M and item N. When Culhane said they were non-human. They were non-human. So whether it was due to an animal or whether an animal had moved something to that location, those the flesh and the blood was determined to be non-human. That's what the report said. It's in CASO. Yep, very, very good observation. Guys, any other comments so far? Neville.
Shane Henry asks, what's the distance between Teresa's home and Avery's salvage yard?
That's a good question. Does anyone know on the panel how many miles away?
I don't on top of my head, but it's far away.
Yeah, I drove it.
Isn't it like 13 miles, 11 or 13 miles?
I want to say it's like a half an hour, 45 minutes away by drive.
I drove it.
Oh, okay.
It's about 40 minutes away.
I was going to say it's about 30 or 40 miles, if I remember right.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was some considerable distance. Correct.
Yes.
And then Double D says
several little towns over.
yes.
Oh, yeah. And Double D asks, was the flesh and blood ever tested?
I believe it was, and it was deemed to be non-human. But remember, you're relying on Cherie Cohen, who did the testing, right?
And Kratz coaching her,
Correct. So I know it's frustrating, but that flesh and blood was deemed to be non-human in origin. So it really wasn't part of the any further analysis done on it. But quite clearly, if Kathleen Zellner could get access to it, you definitely want to test it. You want to extract the DNA to prove whether it's human or not. Correct. All right, guys, shall we move on to the next question? Some really good questions in the audience. Fantastic. All right, I quote. Now, listen carefully, because this was actually brought up previously. I quote, Pevito also found tangled masses of steel wire in the burn pit, the remnants of steel-belted radial tires. He testified that bone fragments were deeply intertwined in the wire, to the point where I actually had to physically pull apart the wire to get in there. Significance? Bones and the tires were burned together. No sinister team of law enforcement conspirators could have simply dumped a mass of bone fragments into the ashes of Stephen Avery's innocent tire fire. What's more, tiny steel fragments from the wires were found in the soil of the burn pit itself, and that soil was black and oily, indicating, according to the arson investigator, that it had been the site of a tire fire. A rake with bits of steel from the tires still caught in its teeth was found nearby, along with other implements used to stoke the fire and break up the bones. So, I've got two questions. Part A. How did the bone fragments get into the wire? Susan?
To see photographic proof of that. I've never seen any bones intertwined in wire.
Me too, Susan. Me too.
They didn't, and he's a liar.
Okay. They just dumped the bones and some of them fell into the wires.
Yeah, it's so small. Why couldn't they just fall in between them little wires?
Okay, that's a possibility. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Well, and my husband says the steel belted part of the tire is like woven little cables. So it's not fine stuff like a screen. It's thick. So shit would have fell right through it like a sieve.
Correct. But they're implying that somehow the bones got intertwined with the wire.
Yeah, maybe if they dumped some out of the box onto the wires, then it would fall into it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other? Sammy?
I don't think they even did that. I don't think they took them out of the box. I think it's all just bullshit. But whatever.
That could be possible.
Exactly.
Sammy.
I want to call BS. He's a liar.
Okay. Okay. Now, this is going to blow your mind. You know who actually was responsible for getting some of the cremains stuck in the wire? Anyone want to have a guess?
The backhoe driver? The backhoe driver?
Good one, BB. No, before the backhoe driver. It's an absolutely unbelievable explanation, and it was actually picked up by Kathleen Zellner.
She's hold on. Now she's back in. Try to reconnect, Zoe. Get Discord back going again. Or yeah, Discord.
I don't think she's home.
Yeah, she just came back in.
Oh,
I think.
on her phone.
Yeah, she's. It's back.
Are we back?
Yes, it's back live. We won't have the Discord background, or the Discord background, but we're still here.
Yeah, they're saying
there it is.
on.
There it is.
Oh.
It's back.
We're back up and going.
We're back?
Yes.
We're back? Oh, good.
Yay.
So just let me recap just quickly. Ken Kratz was talking about the fact that there were bone fragments embedded in the wire. And what Kathleen Zellner discovered was in a diagram drawn by the guy that did the 3D imaging, Bear's chain is entangled in the wire. So what they reckon Bear was doing was, because he was moving across the burn pit with his chain, small wire fragments got entangled in his chain and it scooped up the bones. So what Ken Kratz was trying to imply was that they actually put tires on top of Teresa Hallbach, or the victim, and burnt her. That clearly was not the case, right? So if you have a look at the photographs, the pictures, I think it's on stephenavery.org, you can actually see Bear's chain, and it's got wire. It's actually got written wire entangled in his chain. So that explains how those little cremains or bones got stuck in the wire. In the wire. It wasn't because the person was burnt there. is because the dog bear was moving up and down the burn pit and dragging its chain and hence picking up the wire, which is very, very interesting. And Neverly, do you have a comment?
Recap. We are not even nearly done with this, but let's recap it a little bit, just like a little refresher. So Stephen lured Teresa Holbach in. He called her with star 67. She was lured on the Avery Road where it says you're entering Avery Road, Avery Salvage Yard, and so forth. Then they chained her to the bed. They raped her, cut her hair, her throat, her stomach. They raped her again. Then they went for a break where they watched TV. Then they went back in there.
Yes.
Then they dragged her, but she didn't die. After all of that butchering, she didn't die. They
Correct.
dragged her to the garage, and then they put her in the RAV on that rolly thingy.
Don't forget they shot her in the garage.
Shot her in the garage twice.
10 or 11 times.
Right?
The creeper.
The creeper, there you go. Then they chopped her up, and then they burned her in the burn area pit, which is next to the humongous 50-gallon propane tank.
Propane tank,
on Halloween night, will all the other extended family members around, all the kids going in and out because it's trick-or-treating night, customers also going there, right?
Correct.
Nobody smelled anything. But okay, so they put her in the fire area. They put tires on top of her, right?
And also a van seat, according to King
seat, that's right. Then the whopping fire happened. Then they picked up the large pieces, which are the size of a tooth. Oh, mind you, all the teeth are missing, except for two halves.
Roots.
And then they dumped
two root pieces.
Two root pieces,
two root pieces that were glued back together.
But they don't match. That's right. Then they put the large bones, which are the size, as I said, of the teeth or the pinky nail. Put it in his nephew's and sister's burn barrel, and then they transported it. Yes, 4 pieces. The rest was transported quarter of a mile, half a mile away.
Which no one saw.
Further than that, which no one saw. Yeah, nobody smelled anything. And all of that in the matter of, 3 hours or so?
I think so, correct.
Right? But we made sure that Brandon put a jacket on. Right?
Yes, because
we couldn't say who. Stephen was there with some kids, but we don't know who they were. Brandon was in school, so was Blaine. Yet the bus driver saw it, but maybe not on that day. Maybe it was the previous week.
Correct.
Oh, okay, good story, Kratz.
Yeah,
Nailed it.
But here's the question: how did the jury buy that piece of crap?
Well, they didn't. Remember, 7 didn't.
7 didn't.
They stacked it.
But how did they find Stephen Avery guilty? Now, wait for it. We have 1 victim and we have 2 different murder scenarios.
And 2 different times.
Correct.
Oh, and by the way, Brandon never had sex. He was a virgin. And now he's sitting in prison for sexual offense and mutilation of a body.
Correct. Yeah. And you know, because I even put the little snippet up. They dismissed the charges against Stephen Avery because they couldn't prove it, right? Sexual assault, etc., etc. How in the hell did they prove sexual assault committed by Brendan Dassey? They couldn't.
Words.
No, just words.
Just words. There's no forensic evidence against Brendan Dassey. None.
Mm-hmm.
0. So the story
but
you
now
said,
we know. Yeah.
Yes, now we do. But Neverly, the story you said is so ridiculous and ludicrous. I want to know how the jury bought it.
Intimidation, threatening.
That is the question of the year.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
that's the question of the year.
Paroling there with a gun in his holster, having drinks at a restaurant, pizza being delivered there, chatting with them for 3 hours. Remember, the jurors were related with somebody in law enforcement. Yeah,
that's correct.
The judge was a fucking idiot on their side. Yeah.
Neville,
Well,
you
No
must be
defense
talking
for
to
Brandon.
you must be talking to Bibi a lot, Neville.
Sometimes. Every day.
slowly rubbing off.
Yes, it's French. I picked
Thank-
it up. Yeah, I'm fluent in French.
Thank you, Neville. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Well, yeah, and there was all this other stuff that went on with the jury too. That one guy who got sent home,
Correct.
Mueller, he says there was even bullying going on in the jury. And
Yes.
the first vote, they didn't find him guilty, right? It was like 7-3 in his favor.
That's correct. And two undecided.
Yeah.
So it could so you need a unanimous vote, 12-0.
They stacked the jury.
Yeah.
They stacked the jury. They used bullying tactics. They had officers in. They wouldn't let them rehear Bobby Dassey's testimony when they asked.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was.
But thank you, Bibi. But getting back with what Neville said, right? We listened to what Neville said, and we're laughing inside and shaking our heads. Yet two people are sitting in prison for life on that story, for life, and that's the scary thing. Checking convictions. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment that Brendan said they put a whole body on there. So when did he take it and cut it up after it was burned? I mean, this just doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, I do not understand how anybody could believe this story. It is unbelievable to me. The word of the day, ludicrous.
Yes. Correct. 100% correct. Now, this actually, Neville, do you have another comment?
Yes. Stuart Hodson said, was there a message sent in with the pizza?
Probably intimidation, I would say.
Yes.
But that intimidation commenced in Ken Kratz's closing argument. And Susan will back me up on this when Ken Kratz saying, "You're cops, you're cops." So imagine if they found Stephen Avery not guilty. Then, imagine those jurors if they had to ring up the police or the, the county to help them. It could have turned out really nasty. So the intimidation commenced, when they were in trial, when he was doing the summation. He terrorized the whole lot of them. It's shocking, but it happened. All right, guys. Here's part B. Here's the second part of this question. And checking convictions made a very good point, because Brendan Dassey, when they questioned Brendan Dassey, Brendan said, "Oh, I got the feet and Stephen got the shoulders, and we put Teresa Horbach on whole." There was no mention of cutting, sawing, dismemberment, nothing. So here's the second part of the question. How did the state account for the cut and saw marks in the bones? Who would like to answer that one? Susan.
They didn't, did they?
I have no idea.
Well, Susan, Ken Kratz said, the rake, the shovel was used to break up the bones. But what Ken Kratz forgot was that some of the bones actually had saw marks in them, right? Marks
a shovel doesn't make curve marks. Yeah.
No, it doesn't. So the body was dismembered using blades or knives and some type of blade, a curve I think one of those rotating blades, right? So there was evidence of dismemberment. Ken Kratz didn't want to approach that. He didn't want to talk about it at all. Jack 61.
Yeah, I don't think he ever brought up the hacksaw blade that they did find at least one, maybe two. But, they did bring up the screwdriver. There was a screwdriver found nearby, according to them, right?
Yes.
But I don't know if they ever he tried to connect the dots. I don't think he ever said they took the screwdriver and whatever and broke the bones up. But
correct.
The implication there, is like everything else. It's laying there, so.
Correct. But if you've ever, this again, ludicrous, right? If you've ever seen a cremation, what they do is once all the bones have been burnt, they use a big, heavy metal bar to crack the larger bones because some of the bones are resistant to fire. So even Eisenberg said the bones were crunched. So after the cremation event took place, the bones were actually crunched into smaller fragments, right? They could have been either run over by some heavy object or they were pounded, but they were all broken into tiny fragments. You're not going to get that in a burn pit fire, right? It's ridiculous. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Well, in the cut bones, they were burnt on the cut edge, so they couldn't have been cut up later. So they had to be cut up either in the beginning or in the middle because it still had to be put to fire more because it's burnt in the cut parts.
That's correct. And that's
and also the way they were, Eisenberg said, oh, I can't cut into one because it would shatter because they're so...
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. She didn't want to test one of the bones because she felt that it would damage the specimen. So she refused to actually cut into the bone to do diagnostic tests on it. And part of her job as a forensic anthropologist is to determine human bones and animal bones, but she didn't do it.
And what's the problem if one of these finger-sized bones that aren't even quite as long as a person's fingers did disintegrate while she tried to cut it? Why would that be such a big fucking problem?
Well, it shouldn't be. And you think about it, Culhane used up DNA samples, all of them, from the key and the bullet. Did she have any problems using up all the sample? No.
It's just all very deliberate. Every action was very deliberate to cover this, to present to present the illusion of something happening, the perspective that it happened.
Correct. So why would Eisenberg care if there was 50, 60, 70 different bone fragments? What would the destruction of one have caused? None. She could have determined whether they were human or non-human. So that was a deliberate part on her part not to check it out. Guys, do we have any other comments? Sammy?
No, BB already said what I was going to say.
Okay.
Sorry, man. I haven't had that much coffee today either, so...
All right. So the important point is this. Around the fire, there were tools. Now, if you're burning... Now, remember, Brendan Dassey said they went around the yard and they collected some rubbish and they burnt it, right? And also Stephen Avery burnt brush for a dont as well, right? So therefore, having the shovel, the rake, and other implements is not nefarious. You normally do that just to mix everything together to allow the fire to burn properly. Those instruments are not going to cause cut marks, fine cut marks in bones, right? So therefore, Teresa Horbach, or the victim, was dismembered, right? Brendan never talked about dismemberment. And remember, Brendan said, I faint at the sight of blood. I don't think he witnessed a dismemberment. I don't think he witnessed anything, right? The whole thing was just all made up rubbish. So the bizarre thing is this, right? If I could just make the comment, and Jack61 will back me up on this. When Erdl was describing the sifting process, he even mentioned that there was a blade that you find in a saw. They left it on the burn pit. They didn't even recover it.
That's right.
right?
Left it there.
Yeah, and don't you think if you suspect some type of dismemberment, wouldn't you test the blade and do a DNA test just to see if it had flesh or blood on it?
Immediately.
They left it. That's how crazy this investigation was, right? Something that looked like a possible blade, they left it. I don't even think that DNA tested it, which is pretty crazy.
Wait a minute, Doctor. It was award-winning. Didn't they get like a bunch of awards? Oh, wait, they awarded themselves. Never mind.
Yeah, correct. They awarded themselves and they got promotions. That's for sure. Checking convictions. Do you have a comment?
I was just going to ask, did they test that shovel and rake and screwdriver for any DNA? And if they did, was anything found?
Not as far as I'm aware, no. No. I think...
And the blades.
Correct. I think the only thing they cared about was the fact that they found cremains in Stephen Avery's burn pit. That was good enough for them.
Yeah, they just had
Yeah, correct. I remember we just read not long ago in Brendan's trial, I think it was Fremgen or I don't remember. Someone from the state was on cross or on direct. I'm sorry, anyway, they asked, the question was asked, did you test the rake or whatever they were talking about for DNA? And they said no, but they could tell that, had been used in a fire. So they didn't test it. They just did a visual.
No,
that's all they did.
No, they didn't. Correct, 100% correct. So they actually couldn't connect the tools to Teresa Hallbach or the cremains, which is ridiculous, right? They're giving the impression, right? So if you're burning rubbish on a fire, of course you're going to have a shovel and rakes like that to keep everything together in the center. That's normal. No one's going to disagree with that. All right, guys. Now, the next question. This one's a little bit long, but it's worth listening to. I quote, "The defense couldn't produce much in response. They brought up 3 bone fragments." Now, listen to this. They brought up 3 bone fragments found in a quarry nearby, which Eisenberg thought could possibly be human pelvic bone, but could not be sure were not animal bones. After all, many other bones determined to be animal bones were found at the quarry, which was part of an area hunting site. If the pelvis bones were human and were Teresa's, it doesn't take much imagination to come up with possible explanations, including that Avery threw a few of the larger bone pieces there, where there were already animal bones, in hopes of concealing them, or something as innocent as an animal taking one of the bones from the burn pit area and carrying it to the nearby quarry. To be crystal clear, there was nothing at all to suggest the quarry had been the primary burn site. Nothing. So here's the question, right? Why would Stephen Avery go to the Manitowoc County gravel pit and dispose some of the cremains in 4 separate piles? Alice.
All I can say to that is,
yeah, you took my words.
That's it. That's all that needs is.
Well, there you go. All right, we can stop the podcast now. That's it. Alice has made the most sense. Now, how ridiculous is that?
Well, wasn't it just a minute ago? They were saying that he took the bigger pieces that didn't burn in the burn pit and put them in the
number 2.
Yeah.
Correct.
So then, when did he go on this walkabout?
Yes.
The way
correct.
Over there with bones.
But here's the ridiculous thing, right? Eisenberg, they discovered at least 4 separate dump piles. 4. And in each one of those, they found human cut burnt cremains. Yes, some animal bones as well, but Eisenberg was the one that said that they were human. The only thing that Eisenberg didn't want to do is to call the pelvic bone fragments human. But they were definitely human cremains. How on earth can Ken Kratz say that an animal decided to pick up pelvic bone fragments and specifically take them all the way to the Manitowoc County gravel pit and put them in a burn pile? Was he serious? BB.
Well, and that's just what an animal wants, a burned up, dried up old bone, as opposed to a fleshy, meaty bone.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Again, it's ludicrous. And he wrote this in his book. Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yeah, BB, I just pictured this raccoon stealing a pelvis, right? A burnt up, dry pelvis, like he, snickering and climbing up the burn bear.
That's what we're like, buck with them guys. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I got you now, suckers. Yeah, but what I wanted to say while you were reading that passage, Dr. Silkman, something caught my ear, which is, again, just another proof of what we say, that there's tons of gems, nuggets, and embedded confessions in this book.
Correct.
When he said, it's not far-fetched to conclude, or is it possible, or something like that. Well, look, Kratz, did it happen or not? We can't be going on possibilities if you are the special prosecutor and you know exactly what happened and you have a confession and everything else, right? But he keeps constantly saying it's not far-fetched to think that this is what happened.
Yeah,
well,
because
to me that sounds like you're guessing, buddy.
Yeah, but the other thing is this, Neverly, if I could just make the comment. He now is very, very worried about Kathleen Zellner. Very worried. So now he's now showing a bit of latitude by saying, oh, well, if they were Teresa's bones, Stephen put them there. So now he's blaming Stephen for everything. But the important thing is this, he's now conceding that they could well be human bones and they could well belong to Teresa Hallbark. Right? He's dead scared of Kathleen Zellner and her experts. Thank you, Neverly, checking convictions.
Well, he need not worry about it anymore because now the bones are gone and she cannot test them. So his little excuses or whatever to add to his ridiculous stories doesn't even matter. You can't test them now. So it's beyond whatever the truth is.
Correct. But don't you find it rather amazing that in Ken Kratz's book, he's now saying, he's conceding that they could well be human, they could well belong to Teresa Hallbark, but Stephen put them there, or an animal put them there. So in other words, he's giving this ridiculous reason or reasoning as to why those human cremains are there. Jack 61.
Last night, just in relation to what you're talking about, last night, someone that had actually been around the case and had stepped away is now back. And it's not that they completely stepped away, but they just stopped paying attention to a lot of the newer things that have been brought forward in the last several months. They hadn't seen the newer emails that Ricky and Euros had got, and one of them in specific talking about Norm Gahn.
Yes.
After Zellner's brief hit, and he wanted all these documents, these photographs. He wanted to go back to Calumet or that area to Cuss Road, and go through all this stuff. This reaction to her PCR and all the other things that she brought forward, that to me, that was a complete overreaction on his part. Actually, all of the entire state's part for what she brought forward and then what they did. To me, it was a complete overreaction. If their case was that strong.
Yep, if you're correct, Jack 61. If their case was that strong, they would hand over all the evidence to Kathleen Zellner and her experts. And Kathleen Zellner said from day one, if my scientists find you guilty, I will tell you and I'll tell the world. Right? That's exactly what she said to Stephen. You'll be an idiot to hire me, because she's not going to muck around. She's not going to She's not going to defend a person who's guilty. So all the evidence that she's gathered so far show that the guilt is pointing to someone else and not Stephen and not Brendan, right? And I believe the state are petrified that in the end they're going to end up with nothing. They're going to end up with nothing, and it's going to be very embarrassing for them. And Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yes, Dr. Silkman, I was watching those clips that you were putting up on YouTube, the 3-minute ones. And
Yes.
in the one when Kathleen Zellner says, "Oh, it will be just pure pleasure unmasking Mr. Kratz." Remember that scene?
Yes, I do.
It sent shivers down my spine because people like Kratz, in general, like a private person, not a special district attorney, a special prosecutor from Calumet County with a $350,000 house the prize. When you unmask a narcissist, it's a scary thing. You better have one foot in a stirrup and run because they just turn psycho. And in this case, we have not only one narcissist, but we have plenty. We have the whole state team. And that must have been very scary for them. And no wonder they destroyed every single possible evidence via returning the bones, via we don't know what happened, with burying the RAV and having, cock blocks all over, like the judges who won't allow Zellner to retest anything. So that was a really an eye-opening and scary moment for me. I'm like, wow, should she have said this? You know what I mean? Because they know they're fucked.
Oh, yes.
Pardon my French.
That's okay. That's okay. But you're correct. You're correct. Someone like Kathleen Zellner has laid down the challenge. And that's why, in part, I wanted to put up those clips to show how ridiculous the state's case was against Brendan and Stephen, and to show how pathetic the forensic evidence was, right? Piece by piece. So if you notice, when I put up those clips, I don't say a word. No one from foul play says a word. It's the words of the people that were there in the trial. So therefore, you can see and hear firsthand of how things went down, and that's important. It's not my interpretation, it's what actually went down in the trial and what people actually said.
Yes, you can hear it loudly, beautiful.
Yes. Correct. And that's why if you're new to the case, have a look at those clips. Have a look at those clips, because that'll give you a snapshot of what MAM 1 and MAM 2, and I've got a few more that I want to put up, but it gives you an overall snapshot of the madness that took place. And you have to agree, it's complete madness. Checking convictions.
Yeah, and when you're done looking at those marvelous clips that you put up, go listen to the trial and hear their own words what happened. That will blow your mind.
Correct. And you know what? And Jack 61 will back me up on this. What's even worse is the 2010 post-conviction hearings of Brendan Dassey. That's where you find all the shenanigans that took place. Right, Jack 61?
What an abomination. And what an abomination that Judge Fox did not order a new trial. Or at least move it a step forward toward other things could be presented as to what Kaczynski and O'Kelly did in their collusion with the state.
Correct. And in a way, it's like what Pegel did in the 1985 trial. She whitewashed it. Judge Fox whitewashed what happened in 2010, those post-conviction hearings. It was a joke. Nobody got a slap on the wrist, nothing. Nobody did anything wrong. But I swear you have to listen and read those transcripts. It's chilling. The forces that were working against Brendan, very, very scary. All right, guys. I reckon we'll be able to finish all the questions in this podcast. So here's the next question. Now, this is talking about Dr. Fairgrieve. Dr. Fairgrieve was a forensic anthropologist and he worked for the defense, right? So this is about Dr. Fairgrieve. I quote, "His one point of disagreement, out of which the defense tried and failed to make something, was his unwillingness to identify the primary burn site. However, he did not go so far as to say he thought the Avery burn pit was not the primary burn site, only that based upon the pictures he was shown, he could not make a determination about the primary burn site, and that is in his prior experience. When bones were moved, the majority of the bones were found in the location they were moved to, not the location they were moved from. In reality, if you read the transcripts, you will see that the defense expert explicitly declined to offer any opinion about the location of the primary burn site in this case at all." Now, here's the question. Why couldn't Dr. Fairgrieve determine the primary burn location? Checking convictions.
He said that it was disturbed. It had been, something had happened there that he couldn't make a determination because it wasn't untouched.
Correct. Very, very good. Susan, do you have any comments?
Perhaps because he had no photos to go by.
Ding, 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 ding.
No in situ ones anyway, right?
Correct. Correct. So how was he meant to determine the primary burn site if he never observed any in situ pictures? How can you do it?
You can't.
Check 61. You can't. No, unless you see in situ photographs of all the burn sites, you can't determine where's the primary burn location. Checking convictions.
Can we say that that he didn't want to touch it because, in his expert opinion, it wouldn't have? That more or less he was saying something was not correct there, and he didn't want to put his name on anything, that wouldn't have been correct. I think the guy just didn't want to play the game.
Correct. The problem is, guys, we don't have in situ video and we don't have in situ photographs, right? So everything was done incognito and hidden. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Yeah. There is no primary burn site. There is no crime scene. Period.
Correct. You can't discount the cremains being dumped in the salvage yard. You cannot discount it. Someone with a container or a box or whatever just simply threw them on the ground, right? And what's remarkable is this, if I could just say, Susan, before you come on, Trooper Reese took photographs of the burn pit on the 6th, this before they even knew that was a crime scene. You don't see any cremains piled up on the ash. There's nothing there, right? And I think it was Erdl or Sturdivant that was asked, how were the cremains in that burn pit? He said they were in a pile. So their own photographs prove that they were lying. Susan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, Eisenberg was able. Well, she really wasn't, but Kratz tries to say that Eisenberg could determine that that was the primary burn site without in situ photos. She wasn't there either. And, Eisenberg was a real doctor.
Correct.
He had to make the point that, he wasn't the expert that Eisenberg was.
Correct. So here's the funny thing, right? Say you've got primary, now this is how ridiculous it is. Say you got primary burn site A, where the body was actually cremated. You scoop up all the bones from the primary burn site A. You scoop them all up. You dump them all in the burn pit. which area is going to have the majority of the bones, A or the burn pit? They're in the burn pit because they got moved, right? So Kratz is trying to argue it either way. He goes, no, that's the primary burn site because there's more bones there. Whereas Dr. Fairgrieve is saying, I've seen crime scenes where they've moved the bones from one site to the other site, and the majority of the bones are where they're dumped. Jack 61.
I think it's we can't go past this without saying again, once Jost got the attention of Sturdivant comes over to the burn pit and he starts poking around, and he even says, he found 2 cranial pieces. Immediately, everything's supposed to stop.
Correct.
Whatever back that a little bit there, you moved with that stick, and you get everyone in there to take photos right then. And that's not what they did. They just kept moving forward, like they were going to find someone alive in there. There was no accident situation there at all. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So in other words, Jack 61, what you're trying to say is there was no rush.
No.
Yes. Correct. Whereas if you read Erdel's testimony, they got out because it got dark.
Yeah.
And yet at Cuss Road, what did they bring at Cuss Road?
Floodlights in.
Floodlights. They had the area illuminated for a peat moss bag. And yet they were too scared of the dark at the salvage yard and they had to leave. Susan.
I'm just wondering what made it so obvious that the burn pit had been disturbed to not take photos. How the hell would he know?
Yes.
It was obvious it had been, disturbed.
Correct. And it would have looked fake. It would have looked fake, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you don't want the coroner there to come along and say, excuse me, you're trying to tell me that a body has been burned here and half the body is missing, as in the body walked to different locations? It would have looked so stupid. That's why
Deb Katz would have laughed him off the property.
That's correct. And arrested the sheriff. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Well, at Cuss Road, the pictures we've seen, there's like almost a mile of police tape going back into the woods.
Huge.
Yeah, it's all taped off. They had all the lights and tarps and all them vehicles down there, as well as the one they'd all been up at Steve's. They all went down there. They had the huge roll of cars and vehicles down there. That looked more like a crime scene
100%
from the photos
correct,
than any part of the Avery Salvage Yard.
That's right. So if you were to get 10 random strangers and show them the pictures at Cuss Road and ask the question, does this look like a crime scene? What do you think everyone's going to respond? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Everyone is going to say that is a crime scene, right? And what it is completely mind-blowing how they're trying to say in court with Colburn, and I'll put up the little clip, nothing to see here. And you should see his body language gave it away. He knew he told a lie because his head immediately sinks down. Right? Did you see it? Did you see the clip?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And he rubs his hands, and his eyebrows want to jump right off of his forehead.
Yep.
You can't look more guilty than he looked.
His hand got caught in the cookie jar. He knew it, right? And it's interesting that the same person ropes in Wiegert by saying, oh, yeah, Wiegert phoned me and gave me the license plate number. What the hell? The same person, Colburn, with the license plate number dialing it in, and also he's at Cuss Road with Lenk as well. Now wait for it, to help the crime lab dig up the ground. Are we kidding? Are we kidding here or what? Checking convictions.
Dig up the ground. Okay, they needed ambulance and all that stuff, correct? I mean, they
Correct.
all that at Cuss Road. Yeah. Okay. And
Correct.
since when do you take backhoe, skid loader, whatever you call them around in your area, to find minute, little, teeny, tiny bones in a burn pit. Never.
Correct. Never. And what they did, let's don't muck around. They did it to destroy the burn pit, the entire area. They did it so no one could come back and recheck it. And by destroying it, they made the burn pit look bigger than what it was.
Just like the bones, bigger. They made them look bigger. I mean, if you look at them pictures they have, they make them look bigger. And like Jack said, or Susan, one of the two, said, where's the measurement of the box to show the size of these bones? You know, it's ludicrous.
Completely crazy. 100% agree. All right, guys. I am conscious of the time, but I want to finish these two questions. Okay, I quote. Teresa isn't really a case. Teresa isn't really a case where the bones were moved. This is a case where a few bones were moved, maybe to try to speed up the destruction process, maybe to get rid of some pieces that were not breaking down as well. There is no evidence that any attempt was made to move the majority of the bones. So a statement about most cases where the bones are moved from an expert speaking generally about his experience isn't applicable here. Despite this, the defense's expert's testimony was presented in making a murderer as some sort of bombshell. So here's the question. Could the state prove that the burn pit was the primary burn site? If so, how? Who would like to answer that one? So Kratz is saying that Fairgrieve, you can't trust him. You can't listen to what he's saying. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Susan.
Well, he kind of glides over the fact that Eisenberg couldn't definitely say that was the primary burn site. Correct.
But did the state actually prove the burn pit is the primary burn site?
Of course not.
No, not at all. Not at all. And it had nothing to do with the amount of cremains found, because as Dr. Fairgrieve said, if you're going to move them, you move the majority of them to where you want to dump them. Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yeah, and cleverly again, or foolishly, Kratz talks about the majority of the bones, Okay, Kratz, so where is the actual majority of the bones, like 60% that they're missing? Where is her torso, Kratz?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's the majority of the bones and body parts that we would like to know.
Correct. And this is the disturbing aspect. They don't know where they are. Now, there's no way they could have all disappeared into ash, right? They couldn't have disappeared into ash. Maybe some, but not 60% of the skeletal remains, which means that either skeletal remains were removed or body parts were removed at Cuss Road, or they're buried somewhere or dumped somewhere. That's the scary part. Bibi.
Well, and at Steve's burn area, they use a skid steer or whatever that thing's called, heavy equipment to dig it up. But yet over on Cuss Road, they got guys with shovels.
That's correct.
You know, nothing but a stump.
That's correct.
Yeah, to find nothing but a stump or a rotting bag of peat moss or a piece of plastic or whatever their story is at the moment as to what they found over in what's on the back of that document, the restaging area.
Correct. And that's
there's another balance where it looks more like a crime scene on Cuss Road than at Avery Salvage Yard.
Yes, and don't forget, they actually hired a team to do 3D measurements of the entire area, right?
Yep,
a 3D reconstruction. Yep. Now think about it, Bibi. Why would you bother spending thousands of dollars
Yep, all that manpower. Yep, all the vehicles. Remember them all lined up down the road there? Yeah, all that manpower.
Air Force One fell.
For a peat moss bag.
Yeah, and it took them almost, 24 hours, 48 hours or whatever, to determine that that's all it was, and that it wasn't anything more than that.
That's
correct. With all that manpower, it's not like there was 2 guys over there trying to work it out all day, you know.
That's correct. That's correct. Checking convictions.
Well, it took that long for all them trained police officers to determine it was a peat moss bag. Well, then I wonder if we can even believe anything any of these experts said. That right there is very telling to me about how idiotic this thing is.
Well, I don't think they could have thought up of a good cover story. That's what they put out, a cover story to basically cover themselves. And it was so ridiculous, right? Think about it. They got Bushman onto the scene. Bushman. Why on earth? I know he was retired. Yes, you can ask him. But why would they ask Bushman when they had all the other investigators and officers? And did Bushman write a report?
Nope.
I haven't seen one. Was Bushman called to the stand?
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. So therefore,
how funny.
Yep. So therefore, here's your perfect. What's the proper plausibility of denial? You simply don't call the person up who saw what was actually down there. You don't call them up, so you can deny everything you want. No report, no photographs, nothing. And all Colburn has to say in court, in front of the judge and the jury, it was nothing. And that's it. Done.
You only have to watch that testimony of Colburn about Cuss Road to know that it's all bullshit.
100% correct.
So obviously lying.
Wasn't Bushman a dog expert or something?
Yes, he was. He was a canine handler. Correct. And it was Pagel that prevented the dog from crossing the do not cross police tape.
Yeah, exactly.
Their own dog.
That's what I was going to say is, why did that dog want over there so bad to go pee on the stump,
Correct.
He said, I heard there's a good stump over here. I need to pee. Let me go across. And they wouldn't let him over there. Why wouldn't they let that dog over there? They're paying for that dog. Once again, a resource they're paying for, and they're not utilizing it.
That's correct. That's 100% correct. I can't explain why they wouldn't use their own dogs, which is crazy. Thank you, Bibi. Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yes, the narrative is so full of holes, as we have established it, a long time ago, and still to this day, and we will forever. Let's go back to the Avery Salvage Yards. They're looking for bones. It gets dark. Oh, no problem. We don't want anybody on overtime. We'll resume tomorrow in the morning, right?
Yes.
Yet on Path Road, they have gazillion of cars, all the equipment that we said, floodlights for at night.
Correct.
Really?
Floodlight. Yep.
Yeah, so they didn't find anything. Floodlights over there, but no floodlights at Stephen Avery, where they found the bones, allegedly, but they're going to resume the next day.
Yep. Correct.
Or crime tape.
Or crime tape, or whatever.
Or 2 days later. They skipped a day once they found the bones.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's something really suspicious going on there for sure. 100% agree. All right, guys. Well, look, I am conscious of the time, and I've got one more question, which is remarkable because we can finish chapter 7. I quote. Now, this is a good question. Think about it. The contents of Teresa Hallbach's purse, her cell phone, camera, and PDA were found in Stephen's own burn barrel. Brendan's 17-year-old brother, Blaine, saw his uncle Steve place a white plastic garbage bag into this burn barrel, approximately 20 feet to the north and east of his front door on the afternoon of October 31st, and then observed smoke and the telltale signs of active burning. So here's the question. How did the burnt electronics get into Stephen Avery's burn barrel? Who'd like to have a go at that? Susan?
They were planted.
That's a possibility, yes. Bibi?
Brought in a bag, left there in a bag.
That's a possibility, yep. Anything else?
Couldn't he just been throwing away some chicken or something in his barrel? I mean, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly what he threw in there. Blaine seen, you know what I mean?
But you know
what was in the bag.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they didn't know what was in the bag, so anything's possible that he threw in there. And you know, of course, the other things were planted. We know that, but I just say, you know, Blaine doesn't know what was in that bag.
No, but you know what the worst thing is? Blaine recanted his testimony. He wrote an affidavit. He lied about seeing his uncle placed in the plastic bag.
Ooh.
He recanted it.
So somebody made him say it, and then he took it back because it wasn't the truth.
That's correct, because it wasn't the truth. Jack 61.
Yeah, I don't think we know how it got in there other than to say that somebody helped the case along. That's all I can say for sure.
Yes, but here's the issue I have. Apparently, the officer who looked in the burn barrel, he pulled out a tire, you know, the steel rim of the tire. So if Stephen used a tire to burn those contents, how come some of the plastic of the electronics survived? Isn't it meant to be like a very intense heat? How did those items survive all that heat? Direct
Good point.
I can't answer it. If he's saying that tires were used to burn Teresa Halbach, how? Because the FBI reconstituted those parts and they discovered the PDA, the Motorola phone. How come plastic survived direct burning of a tire?
I don't know the answer to your question.
I think that's impossible.
That sounds like bullshit. But we also know where those damn keys. Where are they?
They haven't found her keys. They haven't found her very expensive camera either.
Oh no, I meant keys.
The teeth,
wallet,
yes.
ID, any of that.
Correct.
And the FBI also could not specifically tie those to Teresa, the
electronics
and the electronics.
Yep, correct.
And you can buy teeth in the mall, right, Fassbender? You could buy Daisy Fuente jeans, but you can't find teeth to replicate what you found there. You know what I mean? Everything is just like, they really think we're stupid.
Well, the thing is, if the fire was that hot, how did the rivets survive? They're metal. How did they survive?
They would have been gone, melted.
All the rivets didn't because they only found one rivet, right?
That's right, and they did find another component of the jeans that was missing, a button or something like that.
Something, pieces of it or something.
Correct, there were things that were missing.
But where the rest of it had to melt and be turned into little pieces of slug or whatever.
Because they know that the temperatures to convert a human body into tiny bone fragments like that, you're looking at around about 1600 degrees. Very, very hot temperatures, right? And yet we have a bone allegedly with some charred muscle on it, which is really interesting. And we find clothing components that aren't burnt. So it doesn't really make sense at all. All right, guys. Checking convictions. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, to me, it just sounds like more of they planted the stuff in and on the property rather than it happened there. Because if you're scooping up bones from someplace and there's rivets in there, that would make sense to only have one in the burn pit. But if you burned the body in the burn pit, you would have extra rivets. You would have teeth. You would have all these extra parts, So it just more or less sounds like they planted everything and it didn't happen there.
And you said a very good point. I reckon the reason why you don't have all the cremains in the burn pit is because they didn't know about the cremains in the Manitowoc County gravel pit until later, because they were found after the 8th, right? So you've got someone obviously must have found some cremains somewhere and thought, okay, this is it, this is what we've got, and they dumped them in the burn pit. All of a sudden, they found more cremains, and it started to get really bad for the state because they couldn't explain it. Jack 61.
That's right. Remember the phone call Sipple made on the 9th?
Yes. They had to expand the crime scene, right?
That's right. Called in asking, basically said, hey, you need to send me 60 or 80 people out here to scare all the land because I found a couple of 5-gallon buckets of bones here. What the hell? Come on, I need some help. And of course, he goes off trying to explain, well, he thinks Avery moved all this stuff. And they had absolutely no proof Avery was ever over there. And I think that's another reason Kratz put that in his book, because they never, ever indicated that Avery was in the quarry or in that area at all.
No. The initial story was that Teresa and her raffle never left the Avery Salvage Yard. I'm afraid that story has been debunked, and it's looking more sillier day by day, especially if what Tom Sawinski observed can be backed up. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Shane Henry said, Steve burned her phone to hopefully delete the voicemails. It worked.
Well, I know I shouldn't laugh, but I put
it is a good one. That is
that's a ripper. I put a little clip in which Ken Kratz throws a tantrum about the voicemails. You got to watch it, right? It's only a short clip, but he absolutely threw a tantrum about wanting to know about who accessed the Buting wanted to know who accessed the voicemails on, I think it was November the 2nd. And the judge asked Ken Kratz, well, do you know who accessed the voicemails? And Ken Kratz, he turned white as a ghost, right? And he then deflected by saying, oh, well, if she had been alive, we want to know about it. Well, excuse me, Jack 61.
Can't we say deer in the headlights was the look on his face? He looked like he was about to stroke.
Yeah, he badly got caught out. And
he never answered the judge's question.
No, he did not.
Yes, he deflected. He says that if he's implying that she's alive, who's saying that she's alive? How about, her brother and ex-boyfriend admitted that they listened to her voicemails? That's all Duty was saying, but see how quick he is and devious he is? But I never seen a hippo jump so fast out of that chair like Kratz did. Oh, my God. Yeah, and again, as Susan said, he never answered the question. Like, never did.
Not on the second, Neverly. They supposedly didn't realize anything until the 3rd.
Yeah.
That she was even missing.
And then, while Kratz was still active on Twitter, he said about some scenario that, another Twitter guy asked. He goes, that's only if you believe that she was killed on the 31st.
That's correct. That's correct. So he was even saying that Teresa, they actually had no proof that the day she was murdered, they got no proof. They can't prove that she died on the 31st. She wasn't seen after the 31st, but that doesn't mean she was dead, right? She could have been kidnapped and held somewhere. We don't know. Checking convictions.
I think they link the 31st, and they use that so frequently only because that is where she was when she was at Stevens, at the Avery Salvage Yard. So I think they just keep connecting that, and everybody just assumes that she was dead that day. I personally don't believe she died that day. So, I think that's the connection that Kratz is trying to make. She was at Stevens that day. It was the 31st, so everything happened on the 31st.
Correct.
Well,
but then, yeah. Sorry, Bibi.
It's all right. Sorry. It's also really weird that it's supposed to be the 31st, but they never ever connect that. They try to expunge the word Halloween. They try and always use October because they knew they couldn't push that Satanist agenda or anything onto Steve because he's too conscientious. He's not, Satan-y enough.
Correct.
For them to push that.
Yes, but they had to use the 30 because that's the narrative they extracted out of Brendan, right? So, in a way, they were forced to go to the 31st. And yet, how nefarious is it for Kratz to suggest, well, who said she died on the 31st? It's just crazy. His story is constantly changing. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Well, yeah, there's been some comments and questions off and on throughout the chat about the bones and how much was found and what was found. Let me tell you what, now, guess what? They are irrelevant. They do not matter because they no longer exist.
Yes, correct. I don't think the state would have kept a few bones. I have a feeling that all the human bones have been given back to the Hallbark family. That's the impression I get.
Illegally.
Yes, correct. Because you're meant to preserve biological evidence, and Norm Gunn knows that.
Yeah,
he knew that.
Little parallel, that what Bibi said, that they never use Halloween word, Halloween, the holiday Halloween, that's widely accepted and whatnot, but the October 31st, that reminds me how they, rarely use the pap smear word, but they called it the intimate sample. So again, there's nothing straightforward in this case, and who's to say that the intimate sample wasn't some residue from the dildo that they collected?
We don't know.
We don't know, but could be.
That's why we need the report. We need the report. Well, that apparently they collected, I think, 3 slides from the pap smear. You want to see the reports, correct? No doubt about that. I mean, unfortunately, even now in 2021, there still is a lot that's unknown, which is disgraceful.
It's supposed to be 3 individual pap smears.
That's correct.
Yeah,
3 slides.
That had taken place over the 5 years, which for a young person, that's really rare for them to have.
Well, they didn't forward the reports. I wonder if there was something in the reports they didn't want known. Just guessing.
Right, because it's really odd for such a young girl to have 3 pap smears within 5 years. So that would have been from the time she's 20 to 25.
Yes.
And it could be something that she contracted, or it could be like precancerous cells, or it could be a myriad of things. You know what I mean?
Right.
But they did not want to tarnish her reputation. And
correct. That's 100% correct. The reports were not tabled. We haven't seen them. We know that they're present, but we haven't seen them. All right, guys. Well, look, it's getting a little bit late for me. For you guys, it's still early in the morning. But can we please round up the discussion? Have you got anything that you would like to report to the panel and mention to our listening audience? Alice, we'll start with you. Do you have anything, Alice?
No, nothing new. Still a bit laid up with the knee, but it's the swelling's gone down slowly but surely. So hopefully on a recovery period.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Alice. Bibi.
No, just basically still lots to talk about the rally, getting ready for the rally house, started packing for the rally.
Awesome.
I know it's still a month away, but
Yep, I'll be looking forward to seeing a podcast from you guys.
We'll be sending lots of stuff for you guys to sift through, and yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bibi. Checking convictions.
Well, I was going to have a podcast at 11 today, but canceled it because of just some reasons we can't do it this today. Sean isn't feeling so well, so we're gonna put that till next week. But we do have the meow meow discussion tomorrow with Alice. So
awesome.
Stay tuned for that. And other than that, just open mic and the normal foul play wonderful thing. And it's very nice to see all these newbies coming and asking very intelligent questions. And so please don't think that anything you ask is ridiculous, because we all have been there. So it's nice to see you.
Fantastic. And look, we don't know all the answers. Okay, we don't know. We're trying to find out a lot of information. And that's why we have a forum like this. No questions are dumb questions. The more questions, the better. Fantastic. Jack 61.
Yep, just to follow up that, just to remember to all the new people, everyone said it. There are no dumb questions. If you're just learning, you're just learning. You don't know. So just ask, and we'll try to help you. Join us on Discord. We're more than happy to help direct you to where you need to go to find information. Next thing is, a lot of really good questions today in the discussion. So I think everyone appreciates that, and it lets us revisit, what we've already been through and what they're going through now. Open mic tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central. Hopefully, we've got a subject picked out, but I haven't got final approval on that yet. But we'll see. If that doesn't work, then we'll do something else. And last thing is just a special word to our friend Rhonda that lost her son. She had a live the other night, and a little moral to him. It's a very difficult thing, for anyone.
It sure is. Sure
so
is.
Anybody's just got the kind word, just give her a little time. I'm sure she'll be back. This is it's extremely difficult. So anyway, that's it. That's it for now.
Yes, thank you so much, Jack 61. Much appreciated. Neverly.
Hello. Well, everybody said what I wanted to say. Personally, everything's fine in my life. Continue with the non-addictive behavior of spending enormous amounts of time in Discord. Love to see all these newbies. And you know what? When we say no question is a stupid question, you guys ask really good questions. It kind of takes us back. And I love the fact that you are not shy. You're just bold. You just ask a question matter of factly, and you see how we just latch on and we go for it. And as Dr. Silkman said, we don't know everything. And sometimes you kind of forget the minute details, or like something that you just simply forgot and you cannot recall, to use their verbiage. Yes. So it's awesome.
Yep, these two cases are huge. There's a massive amount of information. It's very hard to keep it all in your head. But
because it's so illogical.
Yeah, that is correct. But at least we're discussing Ken Kratz's book, and we're tearing it to pieces, page by page. And we're discussing it.
Yeah.
So it has been awesome. No, thank you, Neville. Thank you very much. Susan, do you have any comments?
I'm just looking forward to the rally as well. After obsessing over this case for the last 5 years, it'll be pretty cool to actually be there. Maybe a little bit intimidating, but it'll be something to be there at the courthouse. And
whatever you do, Susan, don't talk like Ken Kratz at the rally. Whatever you do.
I wouldn't do that.
Thanks, Sugar.
Thank you, sweetie.
Thank you, Susan. Is Zoe there?
No, she stepped away, Doc.
I'm here. I'm back.
Oh, good. Do you have anything to add, Zoe?
Where are we at? I just came in. Are we at the end?
Yeah, we're at the end, so.
Close to it.
Zoe was our savior today. Zoe was our savior today.
Well, and my mother. Oops.
We literally grabbed you on your way out the door to go to a party, right?
Well, it was not a party. If it was a party, I wouldn't be home so soon.
Thank God you're not addicted, Zoe.
Right. For fuck's sake, I was worried what you were doing. So many complications. I couldn't sit still at the like the party or whatever meeting, gathering, whatever you want to call it.
Thank you very much, Zoe. Thank you. And Sammy, finally, Sammy, how are you going?
I'm doing good. I just posted a link on there for everybody to get some a little bit of the rally conversation info.
Fantastic.
So just click on that link. It's from Brendan Talk's YouTube channel, and it'll give you some information on the rally for those of you that may be interested in going.
Fantastic.
How are you?
And that's the extended one, the extended rally that we're doing, right? Yeah.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, look, I'd like to thank my panel for all their insight and answering of questions. I'd like to thank all the team for coming in and listening into our podcast. And guys, we do it for you guys, right? We do it for you guys. That's the important thing. We're here to learn, just like you guys are. We don't know all the answers, but it's really heartwarming that we're seeing a lot of new people come into Discord and also following us on our podcast, and that's awesome because you've got new generations of people that pick up the rope and run with it on the case. Well, look, guys, that brings a conclusion to our podcast. Like I said before, if you enjoy what we do, please subscribe. Give us a thumbs up if you like the podcast. Write down some suggestions if you want anything different. We have like an open chat session, so we don't put any pictures or anything like that up, but we do in open mic. So we can expand some of our discussions in open mic where we flash up documents and things like that. Bibi, do you have a final comment?
Yeah, I do. At the very beginning, TTM Fangirl had mentioned she thanked you for telling her about the dental sticks because she quit giving them to her dog.
Yeah.
And the dog quit having mini tremors.
Oh my God, you're
having. So maybe you should do another PSA real quick before you go and give us an update on your dog and these dental sticks and.
Yes.
Please do.
Yeah, the scary thing is that my dog has been having seizures for many, many years, and he has cluster seizures. He has about 4 or 5 seizures within a day or two, and then he has periods where he has no seizures. But what we noticed was we've been feeding him dentist sticks for many, many years, and dentist sticks are a treat where the dog chews on them to clean their teeth. By fluke, I discovered someone had posted a YouTube clip in which their dog, after given dentist sticks, they went into seizures. And I looked at the composition of the dentist sticks, and the chemicals which are in the dentist sticks are horrific, including antifreeze. Yeah, antifreeze and other chemicals. And so what happens is if the materials build up in the blood, they can be toxic and trigger a seizure. And lo and behold, all these other people have reported their dogs are seizuring after being fed dentist sticks. Remove the dentist sticks and the dog stops their seizuring. And the remarkable thing is I haven't given my dog Dentastix, and he's been seizure-free for 11 days, which is incredible. So I'm not saying Dentastix is the cause, but apparently for small dogs, it's nasty stuff. So, yeah, unbelievable. But be careful, Dentastix. There's a lot of rubbish in there that can cause some dogs to go into seizures. Unbelievable. All right, guys. Thank you so much. And hopefully I'll catch you all next week. Thank you.
This has been a Foul Play production.